Grab one of your sleeves and find the notch that you cut in the middle. With right sides facing together, line up the notch with the center seam of your shoulder. Pin that in place. Next, grab one of the ends and line it up with the end of the bodice. Pin in place and then move over to the other end and do the same. Now you'll just want to work from the ends to the center and pin it all in place. Once you're done pinning, we're going to sew it in place. We're going to sew it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Hold the fabric taut as you sew to avoid any bunching. Grab your scissors and trim off any excess. Now we're going to finish the raw edge. If you have a serger will be the easiest way to do this. If you don't, I definitely recommend the bias tape. Make sure you have 1/2 inch and double fold. You're going to want to start at one end of the sleeve. It doesn't matter which one. Grab your bias tape and open up one side completely. This is what we are going to sew down to the wrong side of the jacket. Take the open end of the bias tape and on the wrong side of the sleeve, line it up exactly on the edge. Pin it down. Once pinned, we're going to sew that open end of the bias tape down to the edge of the jacket at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're doing this because we're using 1/2 inch bias tape. If you were using an inch bias tape, you'd want to sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance and so on. When you come to the end, trim off any excess bias tape. You can just trim it flush. Flip the jacket to the other side and pull the bias tape back towards you, making sure you're covering the original stitch you just did. You can pin this all the way down or sew as you go. Now we're going to sew the bias tape down on the other side. I prefer doing an edge stitch for this, but you could also do a 1/4 inch if you'd like. When you're done, it's going to look like this on both sides, a really clean finish. Let's give the shoulder and seam areas a good press before moving on to the next step, which is going to be the sides.